Welcome to Parev TV. Once again, we come to you with an exciting program. This time it is an interview with a very respected member of our community, an activist and an engineer, an executive at an engineering firm who has led a company. Even though he's retired from the engineering firm, he has not retired from the Armenian community. The church, the Armenian nation, the future is of great concern to Mr. Michael Haratunian, and that is what is the discussion today. When earlier today I spoke to him, I asked him, do you think this question, which has been discussed for decades, will this question today, unity of Armenians, unity of the church, help us in any which way? He said, we cannot give up, we have to keep trying, and it is a very important issue. And this is how I'm going to address this interview in good spirits, in terms of hearing from very seasoned people, people who have been in the forefront of our community over the years and have gained experience and would like to share that experience with us. Michael Haratunian, at one point in time years ago, you have said, I believe I have failed, or my generation has failed the church. What did you mean by that?
Well, I thank you, Vartan, for asking me to interview. What I meant by that is the fact that we were a generation that grew up in the church. It was basically an immigrant church at the time, and our whole life revolved around the church primarily. And at one point, soon after independence of Armenia, 1991, it occurred to me that we really have no reason any more to talk about a separation of the church in North America. And it brought me back to the days in the 1960s when I was active, that we did try to bring about unification, and it was done at the highest level of both the diocese and the prelacy. We were authorized actually by the assemblies of both churches to form unity committees and sit and talk and open a dialogue. And I remember those days when we hardly knew each other because we grew up so separately from one another in those days. And we slowly began to open up our hearts to each other and came to the conclusion that it made no sense the way that the church is now competing with one another, especially in the small communities. And we had to do something about it. And people of goodwill got together, and we worked on a plan to bring about that unity of the church. And I have to say that we were allowed to do that by both assemblies, even though there was some hesitation on the part of especially the older generation, the first generation, really. But we did. We started and we continued to work on that, and we did come to a kind of a semi-conclusion in the early 1960s with a document which we called the Guidelines for the Unity of Armenian Church in America. That guideline document was presented to both assemblies, and both assemblies gave it a green light to proceed to the next step. What the next step was going to be the legal document, the creation of a new bylaws of a united church, a merged church between the diocese and the prelacy. That's where we were. And then slowly, after many attempts at trying to bring about that final step, it occurred to me that we failed because we were not able to get the community involved enough to buy into this. We were still steeped in the tragedy of the past. We kept thinking about, well, what happened in the past? Why did you do this to me? Why did you do that to me? Political forces on both sides. It was not easy, and so we failed. And here we are today, basically where we were from that point on.
You know, I think what you mentioned, definitely we've all heard and it makes sense. You mentioned independence, 1991, Armenian independence, where there was more hope for unity. At that period, when Karakin I succeeded Baskin I, there was a great hope. What happened there? Because no matter what unity we're looking for, it has to be agreed by the heads of the church, by the Catholics.
Yes, and we had an opportunity at that time because here it was. The Catholicos of the See of Cilicia suddenly gets elected to Echmiadzin.
Mm-hmm.
The Armenian government at the time, the very first president of Armenia was Levon Bedrosian. He was a great believer in that, and he thought that by electing Karakin I, this would bring about a natural merger of the two and solving the problems. And therefore, he was elected. But you know, the church is an ancient institution. It moves very slowly. And there are a lot of reasons why people can give to say, well, it didn't succeed at that time. It was sad that immediately after the election of Karakin I in Echmiadzin, the people in Antillas decided to have a new election for a new person in Cilicia. And that created once again the status quo. This time with new people in both. Ironically, the one in Echmiadzin came from Antillas.
You know, you definitely know the history of the Armenian people. How back can one go or should go to understand the history of this division? Where do you think is the beginning? Is it the First Republic? Is it the Cold War? Is it assassinations of priests or archbishops? Where is the origin? Where is the wedge that has been formed?
I think you're correct in mentioning the Cold War, because during that period when there was so much anti and pro communism and Soviet Union, the Armenian community worldwide was kind of torn between, do we support Mother Armenia even though it's under Soviet rule, or do we say, no, we want an independent Armenia and we are anti that Soviet Armenia? And it started from there. And we overcame that by when I said independence comes in 91, and it took away all the raison d'etre of why we had that separation before. And you would think we have an independent republic in Armenia. We have a Catholicos in Echmiadzin who comes from Cilicia. And with the new government of Armenia adopted the national anthem of the First Republic, which was what they wanted. The flag was approved. All of that made sense to me, except the church didn't change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said we failed. But you know what, Vartan, I don't really want to dwell on the past. I have a total different message today. I really want to make it clear that we have to not look back, but look forward. I have a great deal of optimism about what I see in the new generation of the clergy and the lay active in the church today. I'm on the board of directors of the St. Nerses Seminary, and I see the kind of youth that's being prepared, mostly American born or American educated. And in their mind, I see no reason why they should even understand why we have this separation today. That's my.
I'm sorry. You when I mentioned a couple of things from the past, you focused on the Cold War, rightfully so. And I don't know if you know all the history and you know all the dates, but it was on October the 28th, 1957. October 28th, 1957, when then Vice President Richard Nixon accepted Archbishop Paroyan, representing the See of Cilicia, at the State Department. And the reason I'm bringing this up is when you speak about we were pawns of foreign elements, foreign powers, I would like to echo that, because that's what I really strongly believe, that we were pawns, period, pawns of foreign powers during the Cold War. That was a major, major period in this very, very unhealthy situation. Where do we go from now? What would you like to see from now? Let's talk about the future.
Well, at this point, the history is what we have today. But we have to look forward. And I'm of the opinion that the issue of church unity has to be in the forefront in the minds of our current church leadership. There is no question that it makes no sense from a spiritual standpoint, from a canonical standpoint of the church, to have two separate dioceses in the same geographic location. It's unheard of throughout our history. But here we have it today as a remnant of those days we just talked about. The time has come for the next generation to pick up the ball and start the dialogue once again. We failed the last time because we got caught up too much in the past. The new generation has to look forward. And by doing that, listen, the church has many issues other than unity to deal with in our modern days. Let's face it. We have a generation that has a different attitude towards life and the role the church should play. Secularism is very strong. Assimilation is taking its toll, and the church has to adapt to what's needed. Church unity is only step one to bring together the best of both groups into one definite consensus as to how we survive and flourish as a church in the Western world. Armenia, I feel, is very safe. I think the church in Armenia, I see it every time I go there. I enter a church, it's full of people, not just old people either. And they truly believe, and the church has now taken root again in Armenia. I give a lot of credit to the Catholicos Karakin II. He's done a wonderful job in that respect. And he's raised a whole new generation of clergy from the seminaries in Armenia. But we have a problem in the West, and our problem has to be solved by us. And I leave it to the younger generation to not accept this division that we have today, but to move on and open up a new dialogue between the two and start the process again.
You know, you speak about the good job Karakin II has done in Armenia. Many people would say Aram I likewise has done a tremendous job and has gained the respect and love and admiration of his flock. And we have no problems with Aram I. And who is controlling the diaspora? Many people would say it's the Antelias Church that's taking care of the diaspora, and they represent the diaspora.
Well, no, I mean, the Echmiadzin has more presence in the diaspora today than ever before. Look at the number of churches we have in the U.S. and the West Coast, the East Coast, Canada. And don't forget, there's a European church and there's a church in Russia today. This is all under Echmiadzin. That's where the bulk of the people are anyway. So I wouldn't say that. But listen, I'm not saying anything against Antelias. Antelias is in a tough situation today.
Very tough.
The East is being torn apart, and the Armenian community is being damaged unbelievably so. And Aram I is doing as best as he can, but the future of the Armenians is not in the Middle East anymore. The future is Armenia. That's where we have to put all our energy.
You know, you speak about the young generation. We have two very dedicated, intelligent primate and prelate, primate Daniel Fendikian and Archbishop Daniel Anushaban. Of course, you know both of them. What would you like to tell them? Because they'll be listening to you.
I would like to tell them, as the new leaders of their respective churches, to open up a dialogue on this issue. So let's start talking to one another once again. There's no reason why we should not be doing that. They should take the lead. They should get around them people who are willing to take on this issue, and in harmony on both sides. Listen, we're not abandoning the church in Antilles. What we're doing is helping the church survive everywhere in the world. A strong church in North America can only be a positive thing for everyone, including Antilles. So my view is the two bishops have to come to agree to form a committee on both sides to represent this new generation. Let them start dealing with this issue on a very practical and open and honest level.
Michael Haratunian, you know it's not going to happen. At least many people will believe that it's very difficult. It will not happen. We all want it to happen, but it will not happen. Why will it not happen? What do you think are the forces that work against this type of meeting or unity?
Well, I don't think the current leadership of both the diocese or the prelacy, that is to say the bishops, are of that mind. I think they're the type of people that are open to this dialogue. I think there are still remnants on both sides that may not be in favor of it, but let's face it, they are diminishing in their power and strength. In the old days, in the days when we were active, they were very much present. But I don't see that anymore. I think we have an opportunity here as a window of opportunity, and I'm not in agreement with you that it will not happen. I still believe it will happen. It will take time, but the beginning has to start. And let's turn it over to them and let them do it.
You know, what I've noticed among the younger generation is they have the courage to protest against said church or priest. And if they don't like what is happening in their churches, they go to another church, which is next door. And many people are migrating from one church to the other. And I would not say from prelacy to Echmiadzin to prelacy, but you know, these are happening. And maybe that's how we can find the solution in the long run.
Oh, yes, I see that myself. The younger generation, married, raising children, are going to whichever church suits them. It's not a matter of what political label it may have or what religious label it may have. It's whatever suits them. And that's the way with crossbreeding, again, that's why I'm happy about this new generation. It wasn't happening in my time, but it is happening now. That's why I remain optimistic. And the clergy that we have today, the younger clergy, even the ones that come from Armenia, I notice are very open and willing to open up to each other. And this is what we need. We don't have the old timers who were stuck in the past on many of these issues. So I see an opportunity. I don't know, I may be an eternal optimist, and I'm not, but I'm not ready to say that it will not happen. It will happen. It's just a question of when.
It's not a matter of being an eternal optimist. It's you care for your people. You care for your church. It comes from the way you express yourself. It's a very difficult thing, but I also came to the conclusion that we cannot just say we cannot do it. We have to find ways of doing it, and we have to find ways of bringing up dialogue to solve these problems, which will make us stronger for the future. Because as you said, unity is not the only problem the church is facing these days. We all know the problems. There are many other serious problems. What is your word of advice? What is your word of to the younger generation, or in general the community who is less actively looking for this dialogue?
Well, I have two points. One, I want to tell the bishops that they should begin to open up to each other on this issue and allow more dialogue with the lay people on both sides on a formal basis, not casual, but formal. Second of all, I happen to believe that the new generation will take up the leadership in this if we give them the opportunity. That's why I begin with the bishops. If the bishops give the okay, and I'm sure that their relative Catholicoses are not going to object to this, because listen, they see the situation as it's developing in the Middle East and everywhere else. America is still very important, and they cannot afford to see the church in America lose ground. The second point I want to make is don't make the current situation normal. It is not normal. Don't accept the fact that this is the way it's going to be and it will stay that way forever. No, it's not normal. It's not right. And we should do something about it.
It is not normal. I agree with you 100%. Also, the situation in Lebanon these days is absolutely not normal. Very, very disturbing news from Lebanon. And in fact, only today in the Armenian Weekly, I'll read the headline. It says, what will become of the Cilician Sea? It was written by a gentleman of Stephen Peligan, I believe. And it's of great concern, the fact that he's posing this question, what will happen to the Cilician Sea?
Well, if the people surrounding the sea, listen, at one time we had a thriving community in Lebanon and Syria, primarily. Slowly, it's been dissipating. However, it would be a huge mistake if people get the idea that, well, Lebanon is now falling apart. Let's move the sea to America, where it's safe. That would be the death blow to the church in America. That should not happen. And so we have to, whatever is left in the Middle East, the Sea of Antilles should remain there, and we should support it as much as we can in dialogue with Etchmiadzin. Etchmiadzin can do a great deal. I'm so happy to see that the Sea of Etchmiadzin donated money to Aram Katolikos for the situation in Lebanon out of its own funds. This is a good sign, and I really feel that it would be necessary to do everything we can to support Antilles, even though the community itself is slowly dying out in the Middle East.
You know, I know you've been there, discussed every part of this issue. If we were to come up with a unity proposal, or they agreed, how would you have the election for primate or prelate? What would you call it, and how would you go about this?
Well, what we proposed back in the 60s was a merger of the two institutions. And both churches would come together as one. There would be an election, and everybody would vote the way we vote now for a primate or a prelate, whatever you want to call him. And the number two in command was the one that lost as a transition stage when we go from where we are now to ultimately one diocese. And so what we proposed was a merger of the two. It's not a question of who will be the archbishop or the bishop of the United Merged Church. It's a question of under what jurisdiction that diocese would be. And there's no question it has to be under the Holy See of Etchmiadzin. But we will have a special relationship with the See of Cilicia. By special, I mean because of the history and because of its presence here in America. We will do everything we can to support that church, to honor the See of Cilicia, and everything we can do. But technically or legally, it would be under the jurisdiction of Etchmiadzin. Remember, the See of Cilicia over history, not too long ago, was very much sympathetic with Etchmiadzin. The Catholicos in Cilicia was very much in harmony with Etchmiadzin. There was no competition there. There was no conflict there. So we should go back to that.
Again, we have to go back to what we said. There was no conflict there. There was a good relationship till this Cold War. I really would like to go back to that period in history where the Cold War, where foreign powers put a wedge between the community.
Yes.
The Soviets, the communists, the bad guys are there, and the good guys are here, and et cetera, et cetera. We all know the story. But many people I speak about unity, they say, don't talk about that. I don't care. I don't want to hear about this issue. What do you tell these people?
I don't listen to those people. That's why I'm referring to the younger generation. You're not hearing that from the younger generation. you're hearing that from people who grew up under that old system, and it's still burning in their heart, and they don't even want to talk about it. But we have to ignore them and move on. That's what I'm suggesting.
I guess it's easier said than done, but hopefully the young generation will hear you, will do something, and hopefully get together. I think there are small signs, hopeful signs out there where the young generation is getting together, whether it's a dance, whether it's a picnic, whether it's a lecture. So there are hopes. Anything in closing, Baron Haratunian?
No, I just want to thank you, Vartan, for doing a wonderful job with your program, and especially with this Paref TV that you've established. I find that to be very enlightening, and I encourage you to keep doing it. And hopefully, we both love the church, and we will hope to see that one day we will see that day. If not now, next time. Thank you.
We can always say we did our share. Thank you very much, Michael Haratunian.
Thank you.